Hey everyone. Hi everyone, and welcome to What Sharon Said, Thoughts on Life, Learning and Anti-Racism. I'm Sharon Hurley Hall. I'm the founder of Sharon's Anti-Racism newsletter, the Share Anti-Racism community. I'm the co-founder of the Introvert Sisters podcast, and I'm an introvert conquering her fear of video. And as you can see, the tech was teching, so I went live a little bit early. But before I dive into what we're talking about today, I'm just going to check that we are running on LinkedIn and YouTube. Yes, it appears that we are live on LinkedIn, and it appears that we are also live on YouTube. So here we are. This is wonderful. I'm glad that you're all back to join me for episode three, a little bit later than usual because I was away, but more on that in the next episode of What Sharon Said. So I wanted this show, as you know, to be more about more than anti-racism, to give me the freedom to talk about anything that came into my mind, which hence the topics of life, learning, and anti-racism, which gives me three beautiful segments in which to divide up the content. So feel free at any point to drop into the chat and say anything that's on your mind. But in the meantime, I will continue. So today's episode is titled Maybe It's Because I'm an Introvert. And it's weird because I think back over my childhood. And, when I was a kid, nobody was talking about introversion. Nobody was talking about it at all. Um, you know, if anything, people said that you were shy, that you were a little bit quiet, what's wrong with that child? Doesn't she have anything to say? That kind of affair. So I was a grown adult before I discovered, probably well into my late 40s, early 50s, before I really started engaging with conversation about introversion. And all of a sudden, it made so many things make so much more sense. And the way that I would feel when having to do lots of social engagements. I think my mom is listening in now, and she'll probably remember the um, the story where she said to me once, "Why is it that you're always so uptight when we go into Bridgetown?" And I apparently said, "Maybe it's because you insist on taking me into Bridgetown." Okay, I see Sandra Seeley in the house. Welcome, Sandra. Thanks for tuning in. And so, yes, there was this. I didn't know that I was an introvert. I just knew that something didn't feel right, and there was so much of the social engagement that seemed overwhelming, and I really struggled to deal with it. So it was really helpful for me to have this language of introversion and then to be able to choose how I showed up as a result. And in fact, this is something that I'm going to be working with a few people one on one with because people often meet me and they say, "How is it that you're introverted and you're always out there?" And how it is because of two things. One, because I grew up at a time when people weren't talking about introversion, so I learned to do what I needed to do, um, otherwise known as masking. Although I don't think I was ever particularly successful in pretending to be introverted, I have to say. Pretending to be extroverted, I mean. Um, but, I had to really try to fix my face and not appear to mind too much when I was forced to be out there and socializing. Sometimes with more success than others, to be honest. Um, But what, that discovery has actually done for me is enabled me to honor that introversion now in the way that I show up, in the way that I operate. It has enabled me to recognize that as an introvert, um, you know, I get more energy from small group one-on-one interactions, while large group and consistent engagements tend to drain me. And so this is why when people meet me one on one and I appear to be able to string two sentences together and I'm not hiding in a corner, they say, well, how can you be introverted? But it's about what gives you energy and what you can cope with. And so for me, learning that has made me think very carefully about how I show up in the world, and what I do and how I choose to spend my time. It has enabled me, for example, to decide when to say no to certain things, to realize when I'm in danger of being overscheduled and therefore overwhelmed, and to opt out. And, one of the first things I did was share it with all my friends, share that news with all my friends. So that when I then said, look, I've already been out 2 nights this week, I can't do another one, they would understand where I was coming from. And honestly, that has been very helpful, and people have been very understanding. And similarly, when it comes to showing up online and doing events, I definitely space them out. And sometimes I say no to things because I know that I'm not going to be at my best if I'm forced to be always on. Always on is not good for me. And it's not good for anybody that has to engage with me, honestly. I'm never out and out rude, hashtag growing up Caribbean, but I still will not be my best self if I'm forced to be constantly almost drained. And so, having learned that, I think very strategically about what I do, when I do it, about building gaps into my day, about giving myself the grounding that I need in order to be able to show up. Yes, welcome, Taryn. Yes, saying no and setting boundaries is crucially important. And, often we find it hard to do. Often we find it hard to do. Um, particularly if you're socialized with a woman, right? But also, if you are a person of the global majority, your no may not be viewed in quite the same way. And so, it's a learning experience for all of us to learn to say no, to learn to recognize our needs, honor those needs, and set boundaries about meeting those needs. And so that's been a big lesson for me as an introvert, as someone who is also quite likely neurodivergent as well, to to set those boundaries, to recognize when things are beginning to get a bit overwhelming, to give myself the tools I need to be able to cope, and to go away and lie in a dark room afterwards if I need to. It won't be a surprise to anyone who's an introvert that after doing this show, I will actually be taking a good half an hour to myself before I do the next thing, because that's what I need to do. And one of the things that I'm going to be working on soon with other people is you know helping people to navigate that balance, right? Because they say, how is it that you're able to do what you do? And I'm going to say, well, here's what I do. Here's how I manage it. Here's how you can manage it. Here's some techniques, some tactics, some things that you can use to support yourself in being able to be out there, to share what you have to share, to show up as you want to show up, and still not exhaust yourself. So definitely that discovery has changed things a lot for me, and has been crucially important in how I choose to go forward now. You know, it is, and I want to encourage anybody who is introverted to, um, So think about that, to think about what it means. And for me, introversion is neither a deficit nor a superpower. It is simply who I am. And just as you manage every other aspect of who you are, it is important to manage your introversion as well. Recharge time, yes, Taryn, is very important. And the longer you engage, the more recharge time you need. I remember going to something a few months ago, and it was a very pleasant event and it was wonderful, but there was a lot of stuff going on. There were a lot of people I didn't know. And so it literally took me about 3 days to get back to what I would consider normal for me. Um, and obviously, then that makes a difference in terms of planning your schedule. You know, you have to get you have to get really granular. You have to think about what is it that it is worth me feeling like this afterwards. All of these questions are very, very important, right? Because all of us, we have things that we want to do. There's an urgency we feel to do what needs to be done, to say what needs to be said, to show up for our communities. But we're not doing anybody any favors if we are exhausted when we show up. We're not doing ourselves any favors long term for our health if we are exhausting ourselves in order to show up. So, you know, um, as Trisha Hersey says, rest is resistance, and introverts need their rest too. So that is definitely something that I want to leave you with today. And also to say that just because you're an introvert, it doesn't mean you can't show up. You just have to manage it so that it honors the person that you are. So, any questions, any comments? I'll just check the chat. Okay, great. Oh, hold on. Yes, I'm so glad that you tuned in, Sandra. Um, yeah, it is very easy to exhaust yourself. And I speak as one who has done that. I, I'm a recovering people pleaser and perfectionist in addition to my introversion. So you can imagine how hard it was for me to learn to say no to things. But I've learned. And I realize that when I do that, hello, Kristen, good to see you in the room. I have learned that when I do that, I can show up better. I can show up more powerfully. I can show up in integrity because I'm honoring the person that I am. And to me, that feels really, really important. Okay, so that was what I wanted to say about introversion. And I'm sure this will be a conversation that we will come back to. And if you want to hear more of what I think about introversion, go back and check out the archives of the Introvert Sisters podcast on the introvertsisters.com. I believe it is still available on Spotify for now. You know, there are things to be said about Spotify, but that is another conversation. Um, but yes, we have 78 episodes where we talk about being introverted and showing up as introverted Black women. And so there's a lot in those archives. All right. Hello. I don't know who LinkedIn user is, but I am very happy to have you here. Thank you for being in the room. This is something that happens to me often on other people's shows, is that my name never shows up. Okay, so let's move on to the learning section. And well, there's a lot to say, but I'm going to keep it pretty short and sweet. I have been experimenting with AI tools just because I believe that when things are out there and the genie is out of the bottle, you need to know how to use them. Now, let me be clear, I am still not letting an AI tool write for me. I am a professional writer with 3.5 decades experience. I honestly believe no AI tool can write better than I can, right? There are people that might be able to write better than I can, but I don't believe an AI tool can. Okay. However, oh, hi, Em. Glad to see you here. However, they do make good research assistants and they're very quick at pulling information together. Now, as I believe now, I can't remember who posted it. Might have been Taryn, might have been Linda, lots of experts in the house. You can't trust everything that they produce. You can't trust, so, you know, always verify, always verify. And this is, it's another reason why, as someone with a background in journalism, I'm not going to be putting out anything that a tool has written for me. But they do make good research assistants. And so I've been trying different tools, Chat GPT, of course, Chat Black GPT, which was recommended to me by Linda Berberich. I've been checking out Claude, which I kind of like, and they all have pros and cons. Chat GPT is useful when you need the tool to go online and check out things for you, right? I experimented with, based on what is publicly available, what kind of bio would you write for Sharon Hurley Hall, just to see what it said. And it was interesting because it pulled in a lot of things, but it's not the bio that I would have written for myself because the tool had no way of telling that some of the information that is available online is no longer relevant to the person that I am today, right? Okay. There is M saying, I use it to analyze and read PDFs, but have it give me the page number so I can double check stats and data. That's a really smart way to use it because you can't guarantee that what it says is going to be reliable. So you always have to double check. But having said that, in terms of speeding up the research process, it is pretty good. So, I've been experimenting. My friend Michelle Allen shared a book with me, which was prompt engineering for puzzle experts, because he's a puzzle designer, puzzle and game designer. And so I used that to create some prompts for simulated expertise in different areas, act as a marketing expert, act as a branding expert, that kind of thing. And I also want to recommend Linda's Linda B. Learning um, newsletter, where she checks out tools of all kinds. Um, she looks at AI for good and technology for good. And so that's a really good place to get smart recommendations about things you should be paying attention to. And finally, on the subject of learning, but actually, let me just check the chat first. Let's see who we got. Taryn says, I use Gemini and Claude to research the articles I write. I use them in an adversarial way to get the best research. Oh, that is smart. I like that. I like that idea. Um, I have seen people talk about, you know, prompting your AI tool to kind of play devil's advocate, which, can be very annoying in real life, but it might be useful in a research setting. Um, and Yes, I also want to remind you that, this is also a segment where if there's something that I have expertise in that you want to know about, you can drop your questions and I can answer them in a future episode. So feel free to do that. And then the last thing to say, though it's not quite live yet, is I am putting together what I'm calling an academy. Well, it kind of is an academy where I'm going to offer a membership for all the learning sessions I've created and all the ones that I will create just for a monthly price. Um, Linda B. Learning, the Linda B. Learning newsletter. I think that's the actual. I think that's the actual URL. Um, and she looks at technology for good and AI for good, among other things, in her newsletter. So it's been out for a couple of months. It's worth paying attention to the back issues. Let's see. Kristen says, I have to use my Microsoft Copilot for work. Oh, oh, let the AI tool do the anti-racist work. Hey, Kristen, I like that idea too. Very, very good. So yes, um, I some of you will know that, one of the things I started doing early in my freelance writing career was testing out web tools and reviewing them. So for me, this is another way of doing that, seeing what's out there, seeing how it can be used, seeing where the limits are for myself, um, and seeing what the capabilities are, because the tools aren't going away. So you have to learn what the better ones are. Shout out to Justice AI from Christian Ortiz, actually, and Chat Black GPT, both of which try to take a more decolonized approach to the production of information via AI tools. Yeah, see what we have here. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that link, M. Yes, Linda B. Learning newsletter.beehive.com and lindablearning.com. Yeah, you honestly cannot go wrong following up those resources, right? And so, yes, I am going to put together a space with everything I've created so far and a few other things. So, right now, that space, which I hope to launch in the next couple of weeks, is going to have the 4 sessions of my newsletter launchpad, including the expanded one that is not available for streaming anywhere else. It's going to have some anti racism resources, it will have some resources related to introversion, and eventually it will have what is now the self publishing masterclass, which might actually be broken into a few sessions. So that's where I'm going to start. But then, as I do stuff on audiobooks and podcasting and book marketing and so on, that's all going to become part of that because there's a lot of stuff in my head and I kind of like to get it out there so it can actually be of use to people. You know how it goes. Okay. Yes, thank you for sharing Sachet. um it's really good to know that that is out there. So there are a lot of tools, and one of the things that I have been working with Linda with is talking about how do we pull out those tools that are less tech broy and bring those out so that we can be using those more often. So, watch this space. I'll probably make an announcement about that when it actually comes out. Okay, and finally, as we move into the last few minutes, anti-racism. Man, is it hard to stay positive with everything that's going on, you know, really, really hard, you know. Um, Yes, I like that, Kristen, making it a habit to use those tools. And yeah, I tend to go to ChatGPT first before I go to those other tools. But I also like Claude because why do I like Claude? Because it's not, I find that I get better output from it when I use it. So and I'm not really sure, it's more of an intuitive thing than knowing exactly why that is. Um, but yes, Justice AI is on my list to actually take a subscription to so that I can use that because it is more along the kinds of lines that, of the kind of tools that we want to be using as people that care about this kind of stuff. So yes, let me just check the chat again. Yes. Okay, so anti-racism. That's all I can say. Like in every community, every group that I'm in, and like people saying, "Oh my gosh, what the actual," right? As something new happens or something else is taken away. But um, I also don't want to fall into the trap of being completely negative because there are a lot of us out there doing good things, right? There are a lot of us out there doing good things. So let me talk a little bit about some of the positives. And one of the big positives for me this week is that the Share Anti-Racism community was able to make the second set of reparations payments. So we have now supported 5 people with small payments just to say, that, hey, we recognize and value your work. We're a small community, so the payments are small, but they will get bigger as the community grows. So I'm really excited about that because that is keeping our promise. This is what we said we were going to do, and this is what we have done. Then sometimes more than the amount itself, just people knowing that you have seen them, that you have recognized their work, that you're supporting them is really, really important. And so I'm very pleased about that. Okay. Um, yes. Okay, so I'm getting some things. We will be dropping the links as well and the recommendations. And thank you, Taryn, for confirming that about Claude, because this was my sense. I didn't know the history of the I didn't know the history of the development, but I definitely felt like I was getting something that was more together out of it. Okay, so, you know, I also want to say that, that community is just the best. On my recent trip away, they did a collection and sent me away with, enough to buy a really nice meal in a restaurant and treat myself, or maybe even two, right? Which was so kind, and I really, really appreciated it. Um, and yeah, and I'm also thrilled that people are recognizing the work, because I believe that that is what my recent Impact Award nomination was for. So I'm excited about that. But in order to talk about, in order not to lose hope completely, I want to bring back to the fore something that I talked about with Lisa and Sam Chavez on Sam's podcast. And this idea, and I published it in the newsletter, the idea that, we are, as anti-racists, are like drops of water all moving in the same direction. And an individual drop might not do much, but all the drops together created, say, the Canyon, right? Every valley that you see practically has been created by water, drops of water working together. And so I think of us as drops. I think of us as people working together, pulling in the same direction, wearing away at the edifice of systemic racism and oppression. And I don't know about you, but that gives me a little bit of hope. I mean, I don't know what you think. I just think that the fact that there are all of us there, all of us here. And here's the thing also, is that when you think about it that way, it also makes it possible to rest. It makes it possible to, move off to one side for a minute, recharge yourself, and then come back to the fray, right? Because you know that there are others out there, and you know that this is not a sprint, it is a marathon. Much overused analogy, but it is true, right? All the gains, the anti-oppression gains that were made, have been made, that we know about historically, were made over years and decades and even centuries. So we're part of something bigger. We're part of something bigger, and we can be the drops. We can be the drops. Let's see. Yes, it definitely feels draining. It feels overwhelming, and I'm not minimizing that at all. I have my moments, as I'm sure we all do, when you're thinking, how much more? What next? But the other thing that I'm hearing in many communities is, okay, yes, it's overwhelming, yes, it's draining, but they're all of us, but we're not giving up. We're going to keep going, because we can't let the forces of darkness, the forces of oppression, the forces of discrimination, we can't let them win, right? The tide is against them. And so we have to keep going. We have to be the drops. We have to be the drops. Hi, Linda. You actually missed out. We were talking about your newsletter earlier. We were talking about technology and AI for good. So be sure to check out that replay, and feel free to drop any useful links that you want to share in the chat on that. Okay, so we are coming almost to the end of this. If you have any questions, if there's something that you would like me to follow up next time, feel free to drop it in the chat. And so next time round, I'm going to talk about my trip to Panama, right? Title, So I Went to Panama. And lots of things that I observed and learned there, which are actually related to the themes of life, learning, and anti-racism. Go figure, because is it everything? So thanks so much for being here. Um, Thanks so much for, it's always a joy to see so many friends in the room. It's always a joy to have comments from the people who are team replay. And I am I'm grateful for your presence. I'm grateful we're here. I'm grateful we're working together. And thank you. And I will see you in a couple of weeks for the next show. Bye.